Now, as you may have noticed, if you are watching from YouTube, we are currently recording from home instead of the studio. The TLDR to this is basically that on one of the days following my final casts with Caedrel, which was last Friday, I saw a friend. The friend was later tested positive for COVID. Now, since then, I have taken a PCR test personally, and it's come back negative. So all around, I'm feeling good. I think that I'm fine. But as a precaution for myself and for all of my colleagues, we are recording this episode remotely. Hopefully we can do future episodes in studio without any problems. But this episode we will be doing from home. So thank you for bearing with us. Hello and welcome to Euphoria. This is episode 3 of our MSI coverage coming out of the Rumble stage 2 of the tournament. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. And today we're going to talk a lot about how the West performed in the Rumble stage, focusing on Mad Lions, their run so far, some expectations, looking forward for bracket stage. But first, Caedrel, this is the big one. We're going to kick off with an interview from the one and only Perkz. Now, before we get into this interview, I got to know, what are you expecting Cloud9's mental state to be following this kind of disastrous group stage? Are you expecting a positive, happy Perkz, a sad Perkz? Like, what do you? Dash did this interview for us. I want to know what your read on Perkz is coming out of this tournament.
Oh, it's a good question. I don't actually know, because sometimes we've seen Perkz be really emotional. I recall a Worlds where he was obviously crying when they were knocked out. And then there's I don't know, this tournament Perkz feels different. I feel like he doesn't mind too much that they've lost, as far as I'm aware, because I feel like they had a decent showing regardless of their win rate, because I don't think their scoreline actually reflected their success in a way. So I don't think he'd be too bothered, obviously disappointed, but I wouldn't expect him to be as emotional as he was at that Worlds once upon a time.
Well, we're going to find out. Let's toss it over to Dash. Let's see what Perkz had to say after Cloud9's dropping out in the Rumble stage, their run across all of MSI, the first 2 stages. Let's see what's on his mind.
Perkz, obviously the end of a tough week and road here at MSI. Ended it on a slightly high note, taking a win over Mad Lions. But 3-7, the road ends here right off the bat, man. I just want to ask you in the immediacy of our final day, how are you reflecting?
How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, how do you feel? But less so how you feel. As somebody who has been to a number of these international competitions, I'm sure you've had to go through this thought process, many, many times. So what do you take away from this event?
Usually it's easier to think about it once you had some time to relax and then actually reflect, right? I think you're very emotional when right after an incident happens, right? Mm-hmm. This is kind of it. It's we did play against the current best in the world, kind of, right? But it definitely shows that we were just not slightly good enough. We were pretty close, but we were not bad, we did beat China, Europe, and Korea in all one tournament. So it's not like we just went into games and just got absolutely shitstormed by everybody.
Yeah,
I think that's the bright side about it. I mean, obviously, losing in groups really sucks. I can't really describe the feeling, but it's not really it's not depression or something. It's not the end of the world.
Right.
Because world is all that matters. So if we can make it to Worlds, hopefully, I'm not gonna say because Cloud didn't make it last year,
That's true.
Then I would hope for the better results.
Well, I think because it's interesting. I think this event more than any other, at least from the outside looking in, it feels difficult to exactly pinpoint how anyone should feel about North America's performance, because as you mentioned, a number of those games were incredibly close. We saw some winning positions for Cloud9 that if the game did go that way, you very much would be moving on to the Rumble stage. And so when, whether or not that reflection has happened yet, but when you do go back and start to look at what went wrong, how do you kind of parse through what means, what says you need to make a change and what can be chalked up to, look, we missed the skill shot, or, it was one single, play that fell through, but the idea was there.
I think honestly, it's not like that. I think we're not even honestly, we are not even bad mechanically or something.
Right.
I think we are out-fighting these teams and we can play stuff. I just think we just lose our head on just the most random things. And I think that comes from maybe we are choking, maybe not, right? I don't know, but like I just think it comes from not being on exactly the same page and us getting challenged more in laning phase compared to NA probably made us play worse as a whole because we were like a bit more maybe confused. I mean, I don't know. Like I'm trying to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that a lot of things does come from practice. I think in practice I realized our flaws. I realized what I can improve to make myself better at this team and make me better for the rest of the team as well.
Yeah.
And that's just helpful to me. And there's like more things I'm going to probably realize in a few more days. But as of right now, I definitely think like some of our, how do I say, is it misperceptions or something before the tournament.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we're like slightly wrong.
Okay.
And that made us like kind of lose our head as well. We have like I think we have like a habit to have a strong opinion about something, and then we have a really strong opinion about something. Why, you know? But it's like not literally like it's not really like, oh, I don't know if this is like very good, but let's try it or something. It's more like, oh, this sucks or this is really bad right now.
Right.
So let's not play it. And then I think it happened like for every role almost. So I think that yeah, maybe just having a bit more open-minded. I think that's something that NA has in general lacked in the previous years as well.
Okay.
And honestly, that's probably the best reflections I have.
No, I mean, that's great, right? And I think that is ultimately what, I'm most curious about is, what you take away from it. But also, too, the fact that you have been to international events as a representative of multiple regions. And so you've already touched on it a little bit, but there are obviously regional differences with the way that, people approach. And unfortunately, this time around, you're on the side of the North American tradition where we go out. But do you feel like you are now equipped with some of the knowledge to maybe help catalyze that change regionally, and that if we do look towards Worlds, not assuming that any one specific team is going to get there, but that you can help domestically and regionally now throughout summer the entire league level up so that you can be more competitive the next time on the international stage?
I mean, we've done it before in Europe, like G2 in 2016 and then 2017 as well.
Right.
Or like 2016 we sucked, right? And then 2017 we leveled up, and then it was like a G2 Fnatic rivalry that leveled up the region, I would say. And I really think in NA we have something similar with Team Liquid going on. I think Team Liquid is personally a pretty good team. I think they would give us good practice in scrims and on stage, right? So I definitely think they're very strong. And I have hopes for NA in that regard. I don't think it's like that far off as to like maybe it felt like in the past, like personally. But I could also be like biased because I'm here right now, right?
True. But
so
you have unique perspective.
Yeah.
You're one of few players who has been on both sides of that rivalry and can speak as a player of both regions. Yeah.
So it's definitely like there's definitely some things that we have to work on.
Yeah.
But as a whole region, for example, adapting in games, I think that's something I noticed. I think NA in general, like, ourselves and the rest of the teams are like pretty bad at playing on the spot. Like you get put in the situation and you make the right move, be decisive, make fast. I think that's something that EU is really good at. But we did actually kind of like beat Mad Lions doing exactly that today. Like we were kind of put on a spot and we were making, like I was making bad decisions, for example, in this game. And we could have just let like Fudge carry it really easily, but I made it a bit harder, So it's like us as a whole, me and the whole team realizing what is our winning condition in the game is something that will for sure help us going forward.
Well, I mean, again, as a player who's made it all the way to the World Finals, there's MSI Finals and MSI Champion as well. I think there's nobody more equipped than you between the two regions to kind of lead that charge and identify what needs to change. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other players on your team, though. You mentioned Fudge. And it has been a major storyline all throughout LCS spring, from lock-in to now criticism thrown his way for underperformance in the lock-in stage. But by many's account, he really stepped up in this tournament. I'm just curious, as a veteran yourself, how you look at a younger player like that and his growth that he's made over the split so far, knowing that we're only halfway through and there's plenty to be done.
Yeah, I mean, I think Fudge is honestly like super talented player. And like he's, from what I've seen of all the OC players, he's the best OC player I've ever seen. And that's like basically says as like a lot, right? He's really talented, and I really admire his like how is it called, attitude towards scrims and towards the game. he's really chill to hang out with as well. And in general, like I didn't have any expectations about him because I didn't know anything about him, right, going into NA. But he's definitely surpassed my no expectations that I had.
Right.
He surpassed them, you know what I
Fair
mean?
enough.
So, and obviously, like he's shown that this tournament he can match anybody, he can beat anybody, and I think that he's also now gained a lot more confidence because of his really good play on carries. I think the meta like shifted a little bit from the spring. We were like playing in the finals. We were playing a lot like tanks, and because it was like tank jungle tank, then mage mid and AD carry bot. But then meta jungle changed a bit, and usually jungle is really broken. So when jungle meta changes, like everything around changes a little bit. Like it just shifts around, or shifts. Let's say it shifts around the strongest role in the game, which is the role that is getting picked or banned. Like for example, in season 8, it was like Akali, Aurelia, LeBlanc were really really broken, and so you had to play the champions that are like good against them. Like for example, right? But right now it's like jungle is like really balanced for like very long time already. So you have to like have champions that are good with them and against them.
That's an incredible and very interesting draft perspective. Just real quickly before I let you go, I'm curious as you look forward on the rest of the tournament, your opinions just on the remaining teams as you face them all. I want to get the player perspective of who you would consider the favorite now here at MSI.
I mean, RNG looked like really strong at the beginning of the tournament, and Damwon looked shaky. But I think as to going forward, I do think Damwon looks the strongest now, and RNG looks a bit more shaky. So I definitely think RNG has fallen off a little bit. I think Matt has better chance than people think to upset RNG or Damwon in best of 5.
Cool.
And I think that PSG is better than what obviously they beat us twice.
Better than what most expected.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
They beat other teams as well. But I think they have the lowest chance to win. And yeah, so I think Damwon is
slight edge to Damwon.
I think Damwon is probably going to win the tournament. Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Well, Perkz, I don't want to take any more of your time. Rather, I know these interviews are never easy, so thank you so much for being willing. And from here, we're tossing it back to Drakos and Caedrel.
Cool. See you guys.
Thank you so much, Dash and Perkz. Kind of an interesting look back on Cloud9. Cloud9 was one of the weirdest stories, one of my favorite stories in this tournament because it was such a kind of a mess, to be honest. Like there were such high highs and such low lows across the entire tournament, and like it's good to hear Luca still optimistic because frankly he's the man that needs to carry the torch if there's going to be an EU NA rivalry, because I think as rightfully pointed out by a lot of people, it's like, okay, but like how long is EU going to punch down and we're still going to call this a rivalry? But I think that there were some moments there from Cloud9, obviously the final game beating Mad also, where it's like, yes, NA can maybe rise up and be EU's rival one more time.
Yeah, he's like Captain America now. He's carrying the torch against Europe. He's going to be the one to finally take us down when he levels up, as he said. No, but I think that was a really, really good interview. So many cool things he talked about, even the in-game stuff, talking about how they actually managed to take down Damwon RNG and Mad Lions. They lost to PSG both times, but they just showed in this tournament alone that round 1, round 2, that they can tussle with the top teams. I think they just lacked a lot of consistency, obviously. Like one game you beat RNG, the next game you lose to Pentanet, right? So their consistency wasn't there. And I think the other interesting thing for me about that interview was the lack of open-mindedness he talked about, saying that if they think something's weak, like let's say a champion's weak or it's strong, as soon as they've drafted their opinion on that champion, that's it. It's set in stone. This champ's useless or this champ's OP. There's no middle ground of, okay, maybe. And I think that he sounds like he's learned a lot from this tournament, things that he can help implement not only to C9, but to NA themselves, especially when he talked about the rivalry with TL and how he can use that similar to G2 Fnatic to level up the region.
Yeah, I think it's especially on the subject of like kind of very strong opinions on champions. I think that was something that in my experience, I mean, especially G2 2016, 2017 was always my read. Because like when I was prepping for big international games, I was always talking, to these players, the Perkz's, the Svens, the Mythis, and asking questions about meta. And they're always guys who have like had very clear opinions. And for the most part, historically, I think they were right. So the fact that they're trying now or willing now to get out of that shell, I think is really big. And that's a big shift, and that's a big big potential gain for the team, because while it's kind of surprises me that they're locked into that mindset, into that like really strong opinion mindset. I think that willingness to adapt is something that we've seen a lot. The willingness to be creative, something we saw a lot from like 2019 G2 and their success. And I'm hoping that we get to see more of that from Cloud9, because I think that, yeah, you could see in like their first games, it was kind of the death sentence of reading the meta wrong, right? Of like not knowing what you need to pick. Like the first game, especially, there was like the Varus priority. Like I assumed that they just played scrims, and like every time they got Varus, the game was unplayable, right? Whereas like everyone else and everything else that we've seen across this tournament has actually been like, well, Kai'Sa Nautilus, otherwise early jungle prio, right? Like those are really the only times you're like really prioing a bot lane. So you can see kind of exactly what he's talking about in some of C9's early drafts, and that they clearly had an idea of what was super, super OP and kind of had to be forced out of that idea. The first Kindred games from Blabber even. It's rough.
Think you saw it as the tournament progressed, right? It went from like Kindreds to more early game focused junglers for Blabber. Top lane went from tanks to more carries. You saw bot lane, they had Senna Tamkench prio, and then they dropped it. And then all of a sudden they had Kai'Sa Nautilus prio, similar to RNG, which bit them in the ass, because then they let Senna Tam go open against Pentanet. So yeah, they were kind of mix and matching throughout the whole tournament. And I think the best thing that you can take away from this, especially from what I know as a player, back in my times when I had a coach who was from NA, his biggest thing about NA that he told me, this coach, I think it was David Lim, he said that NA scrim culture is just odd because no one really wants to speak up. There's a lot of egos, and there's never really discussions on how to improve. I think this scrim culture is a big reason as to why NA's always been a kind of a step behind the EU, just because of the improvement curve. And I think that Perkz already saying like, yeah, we need more open-mindedness. We just need to be more willing to just go for things. It's already a step in that similar direction where people will just open up more, whether they want to argue and let things out, just let it out. Don't let things build up, and don't just kind of beat around the bush on these things. So I think being more straight up with each other is a really good thing. And I think C9, if they make it to Worlds, will do well, honestly. I mean, they already saw that they can tussle with this is the tier 1 teams of each region, right? This is the number 1 team. Like Damwon miles ahead of all the LCK teams, you'd argue.
Yeah.
RNG, yes, was debatably alongside FPX as one of the top teams. Even teams like EDG were tussling with them. But yeah, they're tussling with the best teams in each region. So that's already a good thing to take back. And I think that if they got absolutely smashed, then I'm sure they'd be a lot more disappointed. But I can see why they're not so much disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, when you're able to take games off of all of the big regions, I think that like ultimately it's not too much. And it's crazy to think back when we did our first episode, we were talking a lot about early interviews with Cloud9 where it'd be like, wow, we're happy if we get a single game off day 1. Like those were the first interviews coming out of finals. We're like, we're going to be happy if we're going to get a single game off day 1. We're like, a single game off day 1. So it works out. And of course, those expectations changed and they grew over the course of the tournament. I'm sure they went up and down, but it's like, it's weird to look back even to pre this tournament, what their expectations were versus what the results they achieved, which I would say is more maybe than they initially expected, even if it was still ultimately disappointing. And while this is, of course, the Euphoria podcast, I always like to, especially internationally, check in on Perkz, check in on players like Sven, see how they're doing. But lastly, one player who's not an EU player, but I think does deserve some recognition is Fudge. You heard it already. Dash brought it up in the interview, but this man, the single biggest level up I think we've seen in a single tournament in a very, very long time. Like this guy at the start of the tournament compared to where he was playing towards the end of the tournament, obviously ends in very flashy fashion in a meaningless game on Aurelia, but it's still cool. But more importantly, like the Lee Sin performances, how he looked in week 1 or the first half rather of the initial group stage compared to the second stage, which is the Rumble stage, is crazy to me how much better this guy got, how quickly this guy got just like insanely good.
Yeah, and he was pivotal in their wins against the top teams, right? The Lee Sin stands out the most against both Damwon and RNG, right? You can pick Lee Sin and carry both games against the top teams in those regions with that champion, which requires so much. It like has such a high skill ceiling that you can pull it off, was just great to see. And I will admit, he didn't even get that much jungle attention, barring like a level 3 to 5 gank that he had normally from Blabber's Udyr on those games especially. I don't feel like Blabber played topside that much, especially in the first round of the Rumble, because Herald was always used top on the enemy team. Fudge was playing carries on weak side like Jace, and his tower was being taken. He was getting 1v2 dove. Even when he plays Malphite, he's weak side. So I feel kind of bad that he didn't get as much attention as maybe he deserved, because I think he was a standout performer alongside their bot lane. And I think that the biggest thing is what Perkz said about Fudge was the confidence, right? He got so much more confidence on carries. which is going to be great in his growth. Right, I think that at the start of the year he was getting a bit dunked on by players like Alfari, and then you could see the growth in the finals where it wasn't too much of a one-sided matchup. But now that he's come to MSI, beaten top teams on carries, gotten confidence, he can go back in summer and just kind of, you know, not really have any fears or regrets, which is always great when a player can kind of drop the emotional side of things, whether they're scared or anxious or lack confidence, and then just take the chains off and just do what they can do best.
Hell yeah. I'm ready for this matchup. I'm ready for the Alfari versus Fudge matchup where it's, you know, 1v1 first bloods every game instead of just Alfari overextending and dying every single game. You know, like that's the top lane matchup in NA that I'm actually really excited for. That said, to end it out, Caedrel, how do you feel as an EU player watching Cloud9 like bomb out in groups like this, you know, mixed performances? Are you more or less likely as an EU player, from your perspective as an EU player, to go to North America watching this? Because it's important for me to know. Because like if this inspires players to leave, I'm going to be a sad boy. I'm holding on as tight as I can. As much as I'm sure, you know, Jack and Steve are ready to throw millions to get more players as more and more residencies come through. Like I'm fingers crossed that we're holding on to the best of the best. So do I need to be sweating? Should I be worried? Like based on this, are our EU players going to be like scrambling to leave?
Definitely not, I would say. I don't think... I'll be honest, I don't think that EU players go to NA for international performance, to be honest. I don't think they go to NA for performance too much, unless they want to win the NLCS, which is absolutely fine. We all know why they go to NA. It's the paycheck gap. And I think that obviously the difference in the amount of money you can make. I remember Upset, there was like a Reddit thread on Upset. I think it was a clip he said on his Twitch stream where he was like, well, if NA teams are paying 3 times, 4 times the salary this year, next year, or the year after, then it would just be stupid as a human being not to go for it in the first place. So yeah, I mean, the competition getting better is always a plus. But I think that, for example, if C9 were to make it out of groups and maybe even take a game or two of, let's say, Damwon RNG in a semi, I don't think that would inspire EU players to want to go to NA more than stay in Europe. I just think that it's always a paycheck gap when it comes to those kind of things.
Dang. Well, they're keeping the gap as big as they can. That's all I'll say. They're working hard on the gap there. Good on Luca, making fat stacks over in NA. Hopefully all the boys are, Alfari, etc. Yeah, I think for Cloud9, obviously, like at the end of the day, hope that they can learn, hope that they can come back, hope that eventually they can help rekindle the EU-NA rivalry, because it's been a little one-sided, I think. But here's my question to you, Caedrel. Looking at the Rumble stage holistically now, do you think C9's performance was the biggest surprise in Rumble stage? Like, was C9 what caught you off guard the most, the wild inconsistency, or was there something else that kind of stood out to you?
I think there was a couple things that stood out. There was a lot of expectations I had coming into the start of the tournament even, right? I thought Damwon probably won't drop a game. There was a lot of question marks around RNG. Can they be as good as Damwon? The start of the tournament, like Perkz said, RNG looks pretty good, and Damwon looked shaky. Now it's kind of reversing, where Damwon's just... I don't know if they're just taking the game more seriously or they were just a little bit shaky when they started. But now they look a lot more consistent than RNG. Still quite close between the two, but I think Damwon is slightly favored, like Perkz said. PSG came in out of nowhere. Stomped most teams. Took games off the top teams. Took down Mad Lions as well. Handily took down Cloud9. That was a kind of a big surprise to me. Cloud9 beating all the top teams was a surprise to me. And then losing to Pentanet, which is also a big surprise. Like, first of all, how did Pentanet even get there? So props to the LCO, absolute legends. And then second of all, how are they losing to Pentanet after beating RNG the same day? There was so many surprises. And then as an EU fan, I would say, the last surprise was Mad Lions. I think Vedius put it in a very good context. Like, well, are Mad Lions overperforming or are they underperforming? I think that most people, realistically coming into this tournament with Mad Lions as the representative EU, said that making top 4 would be an achievement. Well, not an achievement, that would be appreciated for Mad Lions. They've made top 4. I don't feel great about that. I think if they make a finals, I'll feel absolutely fantastic that this brand new team can just go from bombing out the planes and worlds to making MSI finals. That would be the best thing ever. They got to beat Damwon to do it, so yeah, I'm not sure about that one. But yeah, I think they've done pretty good so far. I think even if they don't make it to finals, taking a game or two off Damwon would always be a good thing.
Yeah, and I was definitely sweating more for Mad coming into this based on the bomb out and play-ins last year, and I'll say that I've been pleasantly surprised. And I think that, again, they're also a team that's been growing even just immensely over the course of the tournament, and that's a real pleasure to see, because I think it'll help push everything in the region to level up. I don't think it'll be quite as you won't notice it as much as you did like when G2 was really succeeding, and it felt like it pushed, when we were getting 3 teams out of groups, when it felt like all of Europe was really pushing forward and kind of contesting for top 2, which was crazy now to even think about that we put ourselves, or at least I was putting EU so confidently over the LCK based on, G2 smashing SKT in a couple best of 5s, which was 2019 was a good year. I won't lie. It was a good time to be an EU fan. But I think one of the interesting things that we got some rumors on the ground about Damwon. Apparently, the big thing about Damwon is that like they have been going hard. I don't know when they started going hard, but like for context, we've heard that they've been going 12 hours a day, like scrimming, nonstop practicing. I know they refused anything but the bare minimum of interviews to focus on gameplay, is what I have heard. And I think we wanted a day 1 interview and couldn't get one because they were like, nah, practice, focus, practice. So whatever, because we saw inconsistency from day 1 in not plans, but in round 1 groups. And so I'm wondering if since then Damwon have just been like hardcore sweating it out, like absolutely, like we're not messing up again. Because hearing that they're practicing, and again, this is rumors, this is speculation. Or not speculation, but it's a rumor that they're practicing 12 hours a day. Maybe that's a bit hyperbolic. Maybe it's more. But even practicing like hardcore grinding scrims in the middle of a tournament is an insane commitment. Very, 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 very strenuous on the players, I have to imagine. But the kind of thing that makes me sweat even more for Mad coming into this best of 5.
Man, that sounds so tiring, doing that many hours of scrims all day, every day, non-stop, no breaks. Even Armut was saying, I think in an interview somewhere I saw, that it's like, I remember when he was in EUphoria, he said that he was a bit tired already. Humanoid was saying that the whole MSI format is so tiring as well. I don't know how many best of 1s it was in round 2, round 3, around 70, 75 best of 1s, something like that in total. So it's a bit non-stop. On top of that, you have scrims. On top of that, you're in a new country for a new continent for most teams as well. But I think that it makes sense. But I also think the real winner here is Europe, regardless of how well Mad Lions do. Because I think that if you look at... Now, I don't want to go off topic here and talk about the LEC summer split and all that stuff. But for example, I know that G2 has been scrimming the MSI teams. And Wunder said that they've been winning, right? They said that they've been doing pretty well against some of the teams that he named. On the podcast, MSI, another one. He was saying that he did pretty well. And then you have them boot camping right now for summer split that's coming up. You have Vitality doing all these crazy roster changes, Fnatic doing all those changes to Whippo and all that stuff. So I think Europe's actually leveling up a lot as well. And they have a lot of good teams that could go to Worlds. Because, for example, in NA, you have TL and C9 who look like the top dogs. TSM a little bit behind. But then when it comes to Europe, with Mad Lions being at the top, Rogue almost beating them in the best of 5. Now G2's bootcamping before MSI. You've got Vitality with these crazy roster swaps, which could go anyway with Selfmade. Then you got Whippo in the jungle with Fnatic. Like, there's a lot of things to be excited about for Europe, so I think.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree. And I think that's something that we can definitely talk about too as we get closer to summer, is that like us or Europe essentially hosting an international tournament is always super, super good for our region. I think in terms of leveling up as a whole. I think it's harder during Worlds because there's just so many teams, international teams there already, that it's probably harder for European teams to find scrims. But MSI, there's so few top level attendees and so few scrim partners that's like, and you're more likely than not over the course of, you're playing 10 games over 5 days, right? You're doing 2 games in a row. So you can't reliably, like if you scrim anyone, it's not like there's not enough of a cooldown timer between when you scrim them and when you play them to expect like it not to be a disadvantage to your stage performance, right? Like whatever you practice against them, they will be ready for, and that's kind of the gamble you have about scrimming these other MSI teams. So it does open the door for all of these European teams. And I don't know entirely who these teams have been scrimming, who they've been going up. We know G2 has been scrimming. I don't know if any other European teams have been scrimming.
I've heard loads of random things, like for example, Vitality Academy was scrimming Pentanet, lots of EU Masters or Academy teams have been scrimming teams like Pentanet, lots of teams in the first stage of the round robin as well.
I'm happy for Vitality Academy, but I don't think that one.
Yeah, no, obviously it's not a big deal, right? But the fact is that they're scrimming all these like EU Masters / Academy teams, which is always cool because it's like helps them out a little bit. Maybe they can learn something. Maybe some of the wild card or minor regions got smashed by the Academy teams, you'd hope, maybe, and then it just shows even better for Europe. But I don't know how they went. But yeah, I think round 1 was a lot more scrim partners, right? So
I mean, yeah, we got MSI, or we got, Damwon at G2 potentially scrimming. We got Vitality Academy and Pentanet scrimming. Europe's leveling up, Europe's
it's like, dude, it's like Dragon Ball, where it's like Goku and Vegeta are fighting. But then, for example, like in the Cell saga, like Krillin takes out the baby Cell and stuff. Everyone's fighting, so everyone's getting better. It doesn't matter which level,
Yeah, when Krillin fights the Sabermen or whatever in like the first arc, not everybody gets to fight Raditz or whatever. Some people just have to fight the Sabermen,
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, is Pentanet the Sabermen? I don't want to do that to Pentanet. I don't want to do that to Vitality Academy either. We'll just leave the metaphor at that. I feel like no one wants to be a little Saberman.
No, we're not naming names. It's just like it's a metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We're not going to put the pieces together for anyone. You guys can figure it out for yourself. Overall, I think the big thing that we now have to look forward to is, of course, the bracket stage and the best of fives that are coming up. Now, before we do this, we do have another interview with Elyoya. Another one that I'm really curious to see, kind of what Elyoya has to say, kind of looking back and also looking forward, because I remain, I think, cautiously optimistic about match chances. But I think when you're going up against Damwon, you are always the underdog. So I'm ready to hear his perspective on this upcoming best of five.
Elyoya, moving on to the knockout stage, my friend. My first opportunity to talk to you, actually, at this event. So one, it's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for taking the time. But immediately, rookie season, already on the international stage and moving into the semifinals. How does that feel?
I mean, it feels great, yeah, but could feel better if I was playing at my best. So I still have like that feeling of like I could do better. So.
Okay, well then I want to talk about that. Well, what do you feel about your play isn't up to par? Do you feel? Let's compare it to just domestically in the way you were playing throughout the split. You think you're playing worse than you were regionally?
No, I don't think I'm playing worse, but I think for example, these MSI games, like yesterday and 2 days ago, I was playing fine, but I was never impacting the map or like making the difference, which I think is the most important for me. Like, I really want to at least like make the difference in pretty much every game I can. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I wasn't doing it. That's my concern I had.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, hey, that's an incredible mindset to have, to always be looking for ways to impact the map some more. But with that, I think it's also something we got to consider is that your competition here on the international stage is completely different as well. You're playing against the likes of Canyon, you're playing against the likes of Wei, who are not just probably individually some of the top tier talent in the world, but the teams around them are incredible, and they bring in different play styles from different regions. I do know that previously on this podcast, you actually had mentioned that you're excited to play against Canyon because you felt like he was ahead of the West when it came to jungling. Now that you've had that chance, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I still think that he's the best jungler right now, but I've got to say, I was expecting a bit more from Damon and him in particular. Mm-hmm. I think they not underperformed, but I think this is not the Damon I was expecting to see in an international event. I think they are showing weaknesses that we can for sure exploit, and like they have some games that are pretty shaky, which I didn't think they would have. Mm-hmm. So I'm still so excited, but like right now, I know that it's for sure like we can for sure beat them in a BO5.
Well, I just spoke to Perkz and he said the same thing. He does believe that Mad Lions has what it takes to take down either RNG or Damwon in a best of 5. But I'm also curious then, again, because you are at your first international competition. You know, there is this very large perception that Korean teams, Chinese teams are just ahead of the entire Western Hemisphere. Do you feel like that perception, as somebody who's now played into it, is stronger than it actually is, you know, in reality?
I mean, I think it's stronger of what it really is, but there is for sure like, I would say that, for example, China has the big advantage of having like a lot of top teams. Mm. Like I think that since they have so many teams in the league, the fact of having like they have like 5 teams that would be like insane also in this MSI. So I think that's what makes LPL so good. And about LCK, I think that their players are just like really individually like really good. The Damwon, Kia roster, and I think that's the scary part. But like the gap is not so big. Like I think that we can for sure take any one of them down, and like maybe next split we can even like be better than them for sure. So.
Awesome. Just want to get into some of the specifics of the tournament as well. There's been a lot of conversation around the meta and how it's kind of developed in this tournament. In some ways, and in your position most notably, it seems like it's very narrow. Obviously, you have some people reaching for things like the Lilia has come out a few times, but largely it's either Udyr, it's either Morgana, or it's Rumble. And while there's that kind of narrow pool in the jungle, we've seen other lanes have just incredible flexibility, looking at mid lane, everything from a Kiana and a Zed to, Rises and whatnot. Top lane as well, Armut bringing out the Wukong. So what has kind of been your impression of the way that the meta has evolved over the tournament, both for your role and just kind of in general?
I mean, for my role, I would say that it's pretty hard to evolve right now how the jungle is, because it's all about fast clear jungles. The moment you don't have a jungler that can fast clear, then like you're just gonna get advantage of enemy jungler by pretty much doing nothing, by just like doing PvE. That's why I think that pulling out new junglers is really risky in these games, because you're gonna feel a lot that you're missing tempo, and like it's pretty hard to play when you're kind of like, when one team has OP jungler, the other doesn't, then it's pretty hard. But on lanes, it's different, because it's more about matchups. It's more about the interaction of how like both matchup works. Or maybe one champion is really good into the whole enemy comp, and like you can survive laning phase. Mm-hmm. So I would say that the evolution of the meta, the most fascinating thing to me was the Udyr pick that went from pretty much...
everyone said it was dead after all the nerfs.
And then it's first pick ban, maybe one first rotation on red side.
I know. I was kind of hoping he was dead, if I'm being honest. Okay, you were as well.
I went to this tournament and coaches were like, Bolivar Udyr, and I'm like, both dead. Both dead. Let's go Diana, Rumble, Morgana. Fun champs.
Has that been, okay, so is that kind of like a shock to you that you could come to a tournament, and it is something that's a phenomenon that gets talked about a lot, that tournaments develop their own meta, like you come in with these preconceived notions, but at the end of the day, once one thing starts winning, one team starts winning with it, everybody starts to question their own kind of reality. Yeah. And so has that been interesting for you just on this stage to kind of feel that for the first time?
Yeah, it happened on a scrims. Like everyone was kind of forgetting this pick, and then like someone started picking them up. Then more people were picking them up, and like then, I mean, I even remember the first day, like I think in most drafts, it had no prio, and then like as the tournament was going on, like it's now the devil.
Yeah, I mean, we went from 100% prio on Rumble, either banned the whole time, and then today, multiple times, it just went through the draft completely untouched, and that's just been wild to watch. I want to talk about you a little bit more specifically. As you mentioned, you didn't necessarily feel like you were affecting all of the games here so far at the tournament the way that you would want to. As you look towards the knockout stage, we move into best of fives, totally different animal. But you'll find out who you're playing against. You know that you're going to play at least 3 games, maybe 5 games against the same guy and the same team. So how do you kind of plan to prep over these next few days to prepare for that knockout stage?
I mean, it's gonna be really fun to at least like play a BO5 international, because it's gonna be my first one, so I'm really excited to play it. And I'm gonna let the part of preparing drafts and everything to my coaching stuff, so I'm not that involved in that part. Even though, I mean, we were
right. You'll say, please, no Udyr. No, I'm kidding.
No Udyr, no Udyr. I wish. But, I mean, I think it will be like good to see how maybe there is like a bit of a BO5 meta in which some picks rise some priority or some don't. So I'm really excited to see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, you say that, and things that come to mind, it's like, MF in the bot lane as a response to Zyra Worlds a few years ago. I'm always curious which best of 5 is going to be the one for someone to make some kind of a reveal like that. Just as a whole for the team. As we look forward, and we do talk about the potential for you to make it back to an MSI final and defend the title for the region of EU. When I talked to Caedrel before the tournament, his big thing was not focusing on the specific result, but focusing on the idea that he wanted to prove this team has the potential to be the next best team, the best team in Europe, and continue to carry on that title. 1, do you feel like you guys are in the form to do that? And then 2, what are maybe those few things that, as a whole, the team wants to work on between now and then to make sure that you can make that final push?
We for sure have the potential to do it. I think that it's mostly on us. Like, I think we show really dominant games, like the RNG game, which we showed like a really different face that we were showing previous games. So it's really on us to just come on that day and like prove that we are worthy of being here. And I think that we need to work pretty much on early game. I think it's our biggest mistake, also a bit in mid game. But I would say mostly on early game, because once we get some leads, I think we are really good at snowballing and like closing out that game. But yeah, I think that those are the things we should work on.
Commanding once you have those leads, just need to make sure you get them every single time. Well, again, Elyoya, I don't want to take too much of your time. I want to congratulate you on an incredible Rumble stage so far and the birth into the knockout stage. I'm going to let you go, but I'll wish you the best of luck as well in those best of fives, all right?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Drakos, Caedrel, take it away.
Wow, absolutely fantastic interview from Elyoya and Dash. Thank you so much, Dash, for doing that for us on the ground, and Elyoya for the incredibly insightful answers. Caedrel's absolutely speechless from that one. I think that I have a lot of things about this interview that I really, really, truly love. There's a lot to talk about here. So first off, our goal in this section is to talk about the bracket stage. You're good, dude. You got to do what you had to do. Our goal is to talk about the bracket stage, but I do need to start off by calling on that interview how much I'm just an Elyoya fan after this interview, because he literally was like, still think Canyon's the best in the world, but to be honest, bro, I'm a little disappointed in Damwon. I was like, he sounds like their mom. He's like rookie. It's his first international tournament. He's like, I wanted to play against peak Damwon, and you guys let me down. It's like, how is he a disappointed dad and also like an absolute child on the stage? I love it.
Yeah, he was like, yeah, I thought they would be better. Not that impressed. I think we can beat them in a best of 5.
It's true. It's I'm a big. I like his attitude. So I'm really excited the fact that he said that they can beat Damwon in a best of 5. But Caedrel, I gotta know, he's confident. He's feeling good about the team. How are you feeling about Mad Lions in this best of 5, my friend? Are you on the Mad Lions hype train?
It's so hard to say, because I feel like he's right in saying at the end of the interview when he was talking about early game and mid game needs to be fixed a bit. I feel like they've had so many different versions of Mad Lions where it was like randomly their early game was good, okay, especially at the start of the round 1, right? And then their mid game and late game was just really bad, and they fell off. Like teams against teams like Istanbul Wildcats, their later games got like really weak. And then you had games in round 2 where their early game was pretty bad, and then they just kind of picked it up in mid game. And you had the last day of the tournament where they beat RNG, and then they lost to Cloud9. Now I don't know how seriously they were taking that Cloud9 game. I'll say they were taking it serious, but still, it was a bit of a crazy game that they ended up losing. So I am unsure of how well they'll do in the best of 5, but I'm on the train regardless. Whether it crashes, whether it goes 500 miles an hour, whether it gets to the destination, I'm on it.
No, I appreciate that. I think if you're an EU fan, you have to be on the train. You don't have to believe that the train is going to arrive in the station, I think, for the record. I think it's totally reasonable to but you have to be on the train.
Oh my God. So have you ever seen the film Inception? You're waiting for a train. You don't know when where the train will take you. But what was it? It was so good in Inception.
I can't remember either, dude. Someone can bring up the quote. But you got to be on the hype train, for the record. You got to cheer for Mad Lions. Yeah, I'm. The thing is I think if it comes to making your predictions, and we can do our predictions for who's going to make it through, I think I'm still on the side of an RNG Damwon final. Now, if Mad Lions upset Damwon, I do think they can win all of MSI. Like if they beat Damwon, I think they can win MSI. But I do still think that is a really difficult task, especially when we now look at Damwon and how they've been performing. Again, we kind of talked about it briefly before the interview. They've been getting better very fast because they were shaky, and they still have had some shaky games. But for the most part, since those early games, things like think about how much Barrel was just griefing it in the first stage, like how much this guy got caught, and even at the start of the second stage compared to like these last few games, right? Like,
well, I will admit their game against RNG on the final day, it was a bit of a bot gap. I think there was like 2v2 kills, complete montage down there. So Damwon's weakness is still arguably their bot lane in lane. I think their bot lane out of lane is absolutely fine. But then again, if your team's ahead topside and you have Canyon, Showmaker, Khan just kind of winning their lanes or getting natural advantages, then I think playing AD carry is kind of, just plug and play. But he has been performing really well in fights, Ghost. It's just the lane phase is definitely the weak spot, I think.
Yeah, and I think that like when you look at, to the surprise of I think very few, the Showmaker Canyon duo is what I look at. Like if they're doing well, I just expect Dan1 to win. Because you're right. I think it is fair to say that like Ghost has certainly had some incredible pop-off games. Barrel's had his moments, but Barrel has gotten caught a lot. Khan has gotten top-gapped more than a few times this tournament, right? Like he's been a little bit all over the place. And while, yeah, recently I felt more confident in the top side, it's been, as you said, the final game was mostly a bot side kind of thing. I'm also, I'm wondering how he's going to fare, because when you get top-gapped by Fudge, and Fudge's first international tournament, I'm like, and Evie, Jesus, and Evie, I forgot about that. I like burned that one out of my mind. That did happen. That's insane. Yeah, that was absolutely nutty. So I'm kind of like, when I look at this matchup in particular, I'm kind of like, I'm really hoping that Armut can do something similar. Now, I think it's tough. I think Armut has been a bit all over the place this tournament, I'd say. I'd say like he's had some really strong individual performances. He's had some games where he's been quiet, and he's had one or two where he's kind of run it. So to me, I don't think, like, as much as hearing from Elyoya is really interesting, I also think that like Humanoid and Elyoya, I just kind of expect them to weather the storm. I think this series to me is probably going to be a lot more about top lane individually and bot lane individually. Because if you're going to get an early game advantage, it is hard for me to see a world where you get an early game advantage over Showmaker Canyon. Can you get one over Khan? Yeah, that's possible. Can you get one over Dan1's bottom lane? Yeah, that's possible. And for Carzzy and Kaiser, who have been pretty freaking consistent over the course of this tournament, like that is where I'm kind of betting. That is where I am hoping that we see a bit of Diffie in the lane phase and can take at least a couple games off Dan1 in this best of 5.
You say that, but I think, if I remember correctly, the first time Dan1 and Matt played against each other, I think Elyoya actually got a mid gank off and then killed Humanoid for first blood. But that's basically all they did. But yeah, I think you're right. I think Armut hasn't been adapting well. I don't know if it's a meta thing, but his Lee Sin doesn't look as good as the majority of Lee Sins in this tournament. He's still relying on his Wukong. And then he pulls out a Shen, which probably maybe it was working in scrims, but feels like Armut hasn't really grown that much. His Jace again against Cloud9 looked, I mean, let's be honest, he was completely running it in that Jace versus Cloud9 game. He was really sending it. Like there was no breaks on that in train.
Oh my god. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Just to be clear, I agree with you completely, but like I'm still fingers crossed that they weren't taking the game seriously. I don't think it's true, but that's the excuse I'm going to use. That's my copium. You know, it's like, oh, but the game didn't matter.
Yeah, I'm just being a bit brutally honest here, but yeah, bit of copium there. It didn't matter. Armut, just get him on his Wukong or something. I think, or his Jace has been fine, but that one game was bad. His Gnar and Sylas he can rely on, but apart from that, I think it's just the same old Armut. But bot lane is going to be really important, 100%. If Carzzy can get a lead in bot, that's going to be massive. But yeah, Mad Lions have never beaten Dan1 yet in the tournament. They're 0-2 against them. They were a little bit competitive in one of the games, but barring that, I mean, I think the good thing we've seen about Mad Lions is you can see their growth, right? Especially their second game against Pentanet, if I recall correctly, they first rotated Volibear and then they level 1 invaded. So they changed two big things up that game that stood out to me, right? They changed the fact that they're going to start doing more level 1s because Elyoya got absolutely, blasted in a level 1 game against PSG and he was out of the game. So level 1s, they've woken up, snap, done. Great. I think most teams have woken up in level 1s. Second one, early game. Get Elyoya on early game. Volibear earlier. Looks most comfortable. Popping off. Great. Yes, he's been playing Rumble, but he's also been looking good. So I think Mad Lions got to kick up the ass against PSG, and that's really going to help them in the semis.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think one thing that's important to note is that because of the way the tournament structure played out, that Mad played Dan1 Kia 2 days in a row. They played him day 3 and day 4, right, in the Rumble stage. So I'm hoping that with more time to adapt, they can show us more. I think it's like, if you get blasted in one game, I don't think it's super likely that you turn it around in the second. Maybe that's unfair. Yeah, that's probably unfair. I think that ultimately, I think that we will see Mad level up. I think that Mad have talked very openly about their weaknesses, and I hope for more from them. But ultimately, yeah, I think we can both pretty confidently say that this is still a Dan1 Kia favored matchup, especially if we see, while Dan1 Kia have had underperformances, like we've seen when they're playing at their peak, they still get to do Dan1 Kia things, which is, yeah, they fight you if they have to fight you, but they can also just, with very little bloodshed, completely and totally choke you out of a game. And that's that would be my biggest fear for Mad, is when the game just goes from being this interactive 5v5 to playing against a team who absolutely can and knows how to avoid giving you any opportunity to team fight. Because Mad's get out of jail free card so many times in this tournament, so many times domestically, was we'll team fight you. You know what I mean? We will build a team that can either team fight better or we will out execute you in the team fight, because Mad team fighting is very, very good. And I think that when Dan1 Kia are playing peak form and they get an early game lead, depending, obviously draft comes into this. It's not just as simple as if they get an early game lead. But we've seen them just dismantle people in this tournament. And I think that's the thing that scares me the most, is if that version of Daewon Kia can show up consistently.
Yeah, and I mean, just like you said, Mad Lions relied way too much on the team fighting. Now, it was a good thing domestically, but against teams like Damwon, they're going to pull you around the map. There's really no way they're just going to mess up and just go for straight 5v5. Although saying that, they have done that a couple of times. RNG as well, kind of falling victim to just 5v5ing when they're 5k up and then getting aced, and then all of a sudden the game's more competitive, notably C9 games. But I think the most important thing for Mad Lions going into the semis is Damwon do not look unbeatable. RNG do not look unbeatable. No one is unbeatable. Everything's up in the air. It's all going to be about prep and all going to be about just execution, right? And who shows up on the day. Because Damwon could have a bad day. Mad could have a bad day. Could be a 3-0 to Damwon. There's a world where it could be a 3-0 to Mad somehow. But yeah, it's really hard to say. But obviously, I want to live it.
I was going to say, I want to live in the 3-0 Mad world. I don't know what alternate reality that is, but
remember the Worlds last year, G2 versus Gen G, where level 1 they did something every game, and Gen G was like screwed every single game from the level 1. Well, not screwed, but at a disadvantage. I need Mad Lions to do that.
I want that too. And I will say, like, one of the things that Elyoya brought up in general is like best of 5 meta. And I think that that's another thing that greatly excites me. Dash brought up the example of like the MF Zyra, but I think in general, this meta's, if we're honest, pretty boring. I don't know what your read is on this, Caedrel. I think that like maybe it's just because we've watched so many chain best of ones over the course of such a short period of time that I find it boring. But I think that like while there are certainly a large number of flashy picks, we see the same champions so much.
I mean, and I guess this been. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I was like. And it feels like, I guess, because jungle still feels like the primary center of attention for most of the early game, short of like some really crazy individual lane performances. It just feels like the only place that you really need to watch is like, do lanes have prio, and then what is the jungler doing? And since it's the same 3 freaking junglers every game, and what they do is like build a small lead and then just snowball that lead. Now, this is obviously very an oversimplification of what's going on, but as we've watched, 45, 60 best of ones in the last 2 weeks, I think I'm just gonna make that oversimplification. It's just like, I am ready to see, a fresh coat of paint on this meta. I'm ready to see some individual adaptations. I'm ready to see more creative lane counter picks. I'm ready to see less Victor Orianna in the mid lane, more Kiana Lissandras, if we can get, like crazy shit like that.
I think the meta has been a bit saturated from the best of ones, to be honest, where the games are just a bit resident sleeper, because we've seen it 1,000 times what's supposed to happen in every single jungle matchup. I think the only exciting things about this meta is Lee Sin. It's really fun to watch when you have like a Lee Sin Rumble sometimes on your team, or you have like a Renekton Morgana. That's kind of cool to watch, I think. Kiana's again. The bot lanes are really fun to watch as well, I think. Tristana Nautilus, Perkz Elyoya, Xayah in there a little bit. Those are really cool matchups to keep your eye on. Even a little bit of Kalista here and there, because they're all in bot lanes. They're not just sitting and scaling with Ardent or something. But I think you're right. I think, give me some more like Elise. Give me some more, Jarvan jungle or something crazy, Xin Zhao. But again, we're a long way away from that meta. And I think that what Elyoya said in the interview is correct. You have to pick one of these top tier junglers and just power farm, because the second you pick a jungler that's not a PvE jungler that can't power farm, it's just way too risky. You have to make plays happen. And if you don't make plays happen, then you're just so far behind. And even if you do get a couple plays here and there, you're still going to be behind against enemy jungle. And from there, the game's just way too hard to play. So I think the meta has been pretty much solved, I would say. On the puzzle of the meta has been solved on what's OP. I think given the amount of best of one scrims games that every single team's played at MSI here, now it just comes down to, can you find a pocket pick or something like this to just counter it randomly, whether it's something or crazy in a solo lane or bot lane.
Yeah, or the early invades is the other thing, right? You already brought it up for Matt, but like invading Rumble early game, good call. Kind of limited in his pathing. We'll see if there's more creative picks that can do that. But you're right. I think this is the thing that's really rough for junglers and for fans, is that like, why are you only seeing these 3 picks? It's like, well, it's like you must be this tall to ride this ride. It's kind of like you must clear the jungle this fast to play competitive League of Legends. And it's just something that's so valuable. And sadly, it's kind of the same thing that we saw last year at Worlds, which is why I feel this is stagnant, is that like EU got away domestically with playing the set jungles and whatever the ganking junglers, in that last playoffs beforehand. And then when we got to Worlds, it was this rude awakening of like, oh wait, if you don't get 8 chain ganks off, hex flashing from a bush is set jungle, you're just absolutely going to get dumpstered by this Nidalee. And there's literally no playing League of Legends anymore, which I think was like the rude awakening. And I think we've learned that lesson now. And while there was a Volibear game, I think that like the Volibear games even Volibear has like a decent clear speed, but the Volibear games are going to be few and far between, I think, overall.
I think the reason we're seeing Volibear is there's 2 reasons. First reason is either Rumble Morgana banned and Udyr is already first picked, so your only options realistically are Olaf or Volibear at that point. And second reason is just throw a curveball into the game. You saw Blabber do it. You've seen most teams do it when they pick Volibear. Just force, and somehow maybe you can stop the enemy jungle from power farming because he has to match you on the dives or on the counter ganks, right? So, I mean, Volibear is the only champ that can really do that because his gank setup is absolutely nuts. I think he has probably the best gank setup in the game right now. You have like such a long range slow. You have an ult to disable towers. You have a flash running Q that can stun like. You have so much damage as well. I remember seeing, I don't know who it was, against Damwon, the Jace literally getting solo killed by a Volibear, level 10 Jace, level 8 Volibear, just straight up. I think that was the C9 game. I think it was. I can't remember correctly. I can't remember which one game it was, but it was just a Volibear solo killing a Jace. And yeah, I think you're right in saying that level 1s are what's going to shake up this meta. I think that champions are going to be hard. We've seen people try Kalista, Kindred mid, Shen top, but none of it's really stuck on the wall. But you're right. You need to be this tall to ride the ride, and I think a lot of champions don't cut the mark.
Yeah. Final notes. The other series that we're not going to get into as much today, but I think is worth quick hitting on is PSG versus RNG. This is an interesting one. That said, as good as PSG have been, as much as PSG have surprised us, I think this still feels to me very, very RNG favored, and I think that. Looking at it, I expect it to be RNG versus somebody in the finals when it comes down to. What's your read on this series?
I think PSG might win, I think PSG might win. I have a different view. I actually think PSG could win. I think RNG are a bit screwed. I think Damwon were smart in choosing Mad Lions over PSG. Because if you look at RNG's 2 games against PSG, the first one, PSG won. The second one, PSG were winning quite convincingly. And then RNG just kind of pulled them around the map with, I think it was a TF, and then they eventually lost. But I think PSG was winning that game, and they should have had that game. Against Damwon as well, I think that they were performing decently. But yeah, the second time they played against Damwon, they got a bit smashed that time. But they were, I think, having early leads the first time they played against each other. And RNG, I think they griefed their draft a bit. They were playing like TF Lilia mid-jungle into Zoe Rumble, which I think is disturbing. I remember seeing an interview with Showmaker where he said, yeah, Zoe is just, it's OP. It's good in the early, mid, late, and it makes it so I can help my laners a lot. And I think that Zoe is going to be a huge pick for all teams coming into the semifinals. Maybe not so much Crine, but I think, for example, Maple, Showmaker, and Humanoid are all going to try to prioritize this Zoe because we haven't seen Crine actually play it yet. Because you get early push, you can move the sides really easily, you can free up your jungler a lot. Especially if you're playing things like Jace on the side lane or a volatile bot lane, right? So, or like a snowbally top matchup. So I think this champ will be really important. I think Krine's response to a Zoe is TF. So I'm slightly worried for him. I think he has been the weak spot. But yeah, I think RNG, we're struggling against PSG. I still think RNG will take the series. I think PSG has definitely surprised everyone getting into the top 4 and finishing 3rd, actually, not 4th. I thought it would be like, after day 2 of the Rumble, it was going to be Damwon, RNG and Mad top 3. And then C9 and PSG fighting for 4th. But no, we're wrong. It looks like PSG is the 3rd best team in group stage. And they did take down Mad Lions in the round 2. So we'll have to see how they do. I think RNG will win. I think it'll be a 3-1 to RNG still. Something like that. But PSG might be competitive.
I think it's totally fair to say that PSG are going to be super competitive. Because I think you're right. The context of the games is really important. I guess I was looking more at Mad's ceilings, which I think is probably less immediately relevant than the matches they actually played against each other. And I think that context is really important to call out. So I think good shout. I think the mid lane, especially for Showmaker, to me, like I think Wei and River is going to be interesting, but I'm curious to see like how that matchup develops. I think River has also been a player that surprised me. I think I wasn't as impressed when I watched his domestic games, but he's like been very consistent across this tournament. But for Maple rather, I can't help but this is part of me that's like Maple's on a tear for revenge. He left LPL. He's back in the PCS, formerly the LMS. Like there's a part of me that wants to believe in that underdog storyline, and there's a part of me that's also like, if anyone's going to like pop off on Zoe and carry their team, I believe in Maple. That said, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up Doggo versus Gala for like 5 games. If we can get 5 games, it's got to be like definitely the most hype bot lane matchup you can possibly get. Because while like Matt has certainly had an interesting bot lane, Dan Kia bot lanes has been kind of boring, and both of these 2 bot lanes have been like core to their team's success. Because yes, Ming has had some games where you've looked at him, he's like, wow, Ming is dying a lot for sure. And some of the RNG losses, that was a problem. But Ming is also like such an crazy good playmaker, and it's a similar story for Kaiwing. So like bot lane matchup again just feels like this is going to be what, if you could just give me a camera on bot lane, this is what I would want to watch in this matchup.
Here's my take. You want to hear my take?
Yep.
I think Maple was really good in round 1. I have to say in round 2, I think Doggo is actually the secret hidden carry here that people should look at more. I think against Mad Lions, against RNG, this guy on things like Tristana, Zaya, Kaisa was actually carrying really hard. And although Maple had like a really good Akali game, I think you'll remember against C9, and a really good Zoe game against RNG, I think Doggo was the consistent carry of this team. He's doing more damage, gets more gold, pot more kills. And although Maple's like this star player we always look at as like this huge international experienced veteran, I think Doggo is just, I mean, he's just coming out of nowhere as a sub, just murdering people, man. Like massive props to that guy. I think he's playing phenomenal.
The Doggo story is crazy, dude. I mean, and even like him and Gala, we just look at the 2 games that they played against each other. Both of them like feast or famine. One game, Doggo, 7-3-14 on Tristana, absolutely hard smurfing. Now Maple popped off on Zoe in that game, but in the opposite game, you've got Gala 7-1-5. You know what I mean? So like these guys, someone is getting like taken out, and it's going to be explosive.
I will admit, I think Gala is the best AD at this tournament. Like that guy's absolutely coconuts when I watch his games. His team fights are practically flawless. His lane phase is incredible. I remember watching Damwon RNG yesterday when they hook him with Nautilus level 2 and they hit. Great. The second they do this, Gala instantly jumps on their enemy AD carry because he knows Nautilus has no spells, no aftershock, and they get first blood. Like Gala in fights as well. This guy, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh my god. So yeah, I think the lesson that I've learned talking through all of these is that like jungle's fine. It's probably where the leads come from, but the lane that we actually want to watch in any matchup in this meta is bot lane. Bot lane is the lane where people kill each other. Bot lane is the lane where shit happens. Bot lane is the lane where like I think we're going to see some of these gaps. Maybe we get more Aurelia Jaces like we saw in Fudge versus Arma. Maybe. But I think if you are coming into this tournament and you want to know where you need to focus, I feel like bot lane is all of the banging matchups are in bot lane. Like honestly, like Ming versus Kaiwing, Gala versus Doggo. We've got Karzi versus Ghost. We've got Kaiser versus Beryl. Like every single bot lane matchup is hyped to me.
It's
so
that's
I think what we'll leave you with is like it's all about bot lane. Final note here from me, Caedrel. Who wins MSI 2021? Who's taking it? What are your predictions? Give me 3 quick predictions for each series. They can be casual. I'm not going to make you bet anything here because obviously we've still got to prep for these series. We just found out that this is happening yesterday. Who these matchups are going to be.
Well, I'm always down for upsets, but I think RNG will beat PSG 3-1. I think Damwon will beat Mad Lions 3-0, 3-1. And I think that Damwon will beat RNG 3-0, 3-1 as well. I think that it will be a Damwon win. I don't want to set my predictions in stone just yet, but when I get asked for them, I'll think about it a little bit more. But as just a general overview, I think that's basically what I'm looking at for this MSI.
Dang.
Actually, it's hard. RNG might win the finals as well if they get there against Damwon. Oh my god.
Yeah, I think important things to know for me. I'm just going to say I agree with you generally because these are, again, casual predictions. We'll make more formal predictions in the future. I think that my read on it right now, not having looked deeper into the games, just as someone who's been watching from home over the last few days, I would say that like what I see right now is that RNG should win. Absolutely. Like that one I'm 100% confident in. That's like that one I think it's weird to say that, but I think I am actually really confident. I think you're right. Gala's pretty cracked. Way's really good. And not to take anything away from PSG, they've had a great tournament. Ming is Ming. Despite the shaky 2 games that they played against each other. On the opposite side, I think 3-0, 3-1 is fair, and I think it'll be 3-0, 3-1 for either side. Now, I agree with you. I think that Daewon have probably got the edge here, But that said, I have a lot of faith in Mad and specifically Mad's coaching staff. Not to take anything away from Coma or anything on the Damwon coaching staff. I just don't know what they do. But I know what Mad does, and Mad comes prepared. If anyone's going to have crazy picks, crazy level ones, crazy stuff prepared, it is the Mad coaching staff.
Can you imagine a world where Mad Lions like go to 5 games against Damwon? They take them down 3-2. Damwon, the world champions, out. Mad Lions go to the finals. PSG almost beat RNG. RNG sweat for their lives. Backdoor against, similar to Cloud9. They managed to close out the series 3-2 against PSG. RNG versus Mad Lions finals. It goes to 5 games as well. It's the 5th game. Humanoid and Carzy go for the backdoor. Something crazy happens. Mad Lion style. Tam can jolt into the base. And then it's a base race. Dude, I'm always down for that.
Okay, here's the thing I'll say, as I think my Roomba's starting up. Hopefully that doesn't get picked up. All right, here's what I'll say. This is the thing. What EU fans have to consider here, while it is a bit of a long shot, is that if Mad Lions win MSI, this is probably the greatest achievement of EU ever, because they will have done it going through, if RNG are in the finals, they'll have done it going through both the LCK and the LPL. Because remember last MSI, we did win. It is fantastic, but we look back at that finals and it's like, everyone wonders, would we have won if it was IG rocking up into that final instead of TL? If Mad Lions win, if they win over Damwon, and if they win over RNG, I think
that'll be nuts.
This is like probably the biggest international achievement for EU. This replaces previous MSI, I would say.
That would be nuts. That would be nuts.
Actually crazy.
Yeah.
And the Elyoya story continues. Anyway, that's going to do it for us here. This has been EUphoria, the MSI coverage, episode 3. Thank you so much for listening. I think that we will be back in the future just to close out our coverage, to recap everything that happened at MSI, maybe have a bit of fun, maybe talk a little bit about summer upcoming, a little bit more about the roster rumors. Caedrel. Yeah, Caedrel already talked about them a little bit, so we'll keep you guys informed as to all of the actually crazy shit that is happening in the offseason. So between LEC and MSI, we hope you guys are hyped, and we'll see you in the future.